The flickering candlelight danced across the map spread on the table, casting long shadows that seemed to move with a life of their own. The room was dimly lit, the only source of light being the solitary candle that struggled against the encroaching darkness. It was a cold December night in 1944, the kind of cold that seeped into your bones and made every breath a struggle. The winter had been particularly harsh that year, adding another layer of difficulty to an already impossible situation. 4 pairs of eyes, belonging to Sergeant Turner, Corporal Johnson, Private Wilson, and Private Miller, were glued to the intricate details of the German-occupied territory. Each man was lost in his thoughts, calculating risks and considering the best routes for their mission. They were huddled in a makeshift war room, a drafty barn somewhere in France. The barn had seen better days, its wooden beams creaking under the weight of history and the burden of the task at hand. Outside, the wind howled a mournful tune, but inside, the air crackled with anticipation. The soldiers could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on them, a tangible force that made the air thick and heavy, and...
Men, our mission is of vital importance. The success of this operation could change the course of the war.
Sergeant Turner, a man hardened by war but not devoid of compassion, cleared his throat. He had seen more than his fair share of battles, and each one had left its mark on him, both physically and emotionally. His voice, low and steady, cut through the silence like a knife. It was a voice that commanded respect, a voice that had led men through the darkest of times.
This bridge is crucial for the German supply lines. Without it, their ability to move troops and supplies will be severely hampered. We need to destroy it. This is not just a mission, it's a statement that we will not be defeated.
His finger tapped the location on the map, a small but significant point that held the key to their mission's success. The mission was as dangerous as it was straightforward. Infiltrate, plant the explosives, and get out. Simple in theory, but the reality was far more complex. They were to infiltrate behind enemy lines, plant explosives on the bridge's critical supports, and get out before the Germans knew what hit them. It was a plan that required precision, timing, and a fair bit of luck. It was a suicide mission, or as close to it as any soldier ever wants to get. The odds were stacked against them, but they had no choice. Failure was not an option. But these 4 men, veterans of countless firefights and close calls, accepted their fate with grim determination. They knew the risks, but they also knew the stakes.
We move out at dawn. Be ready. This is our chance to make a difference.
Turner concluded, his gaze sweeping over his men. Each one of them was a seasoned warrior, but even the bravest among them felt the weight of what lay ahead. Each face reflected the same blend of fear and resolve. They were scared, but they were ready. Ready to do whatever it took to complete the mission. They were about to embark on a journey from which they might not return, a one-way ticket to the heart of the enemy's territory. The gravity of the situation was not lost on any of them. Their mission to strike a blow against the Nazi war machine, a blow that could help turn the tide of the war. It was a daunting task, but one they were prepared to undertake. The fate of countless lives depended on their success, and they would not let them down. As they prepared to move out, the soldiers shared a moment of camaraderie. A handshake here, a pat on the back there, small gestures that spoke volumes about their bond and their commitment to each other. They checked their gear one last time, making sure everything was in place. Every piece of equipment, every weapon, had to be perfect. There was no room for error. Dawn broke over the horizon, casting a pale light over the landscape. The soldiers, silhouetted against the rising sun, looked like shadows of the men they once were. Hardened by war, but not broken. With determined expressions, they moved out, each step taking them closer to their objective, and further from the safety they once knew. The mission had begun, and there was no turning back. The world would soon know of their bravery, their sacrifice. But for now, they were just 4 men on a mission, doing what needed to be done. The fate of the war, and perhaps the world, rested on their shoulders. As they disappeared into the distance, the landscape seemed to swallow them up. They were alone, but they were ready. Ready to face whatever came their way, for the sake of their comrades, their country, and the world. The biting wind seemed to cut right through their thick winter uniforms as they navigated the snow-covered terrain. Each step was a struggle, their boots sinking into the deep snow, making every movement laborious and exhausting. The cold was relentless, seeping into their bones despite the layers of clothing meant to protect them. They moved like phantoms, their figures barely discernible against the backdrop of a bleak, wintry landscape. The snow provided a natural camouflage, blending their forms into the surroundings, making them almost invisible to any watchful eyes. The forest, with its skeletal trees and snow-laden branches, seemed to close in around them, adding to the sense of isolation and vulnerability. The silence of the forest was broken only by the crunch of boots on snow and their own heavy breathing. Each breath was a visible puff of steam in the frigid air, a reminder of the harsh conditions they were enduring. The sound of their footsteps echoed in the stillness, a constant reminder of their presence in an otherwise silent world. Each man carried the weight of their mission, but even more so, the weight of their unspoken fears. The burden of responsibility was heavy, and the knowledge that failure could mean death for them and their comrades was ever present. Their faces, etched with determination, also showed the strain of their inner battles, the silent struggles that each soldier faced. Days turned into nights, and still they pressed on, fueled by gritty determination and cold rations. The food was barely enough to sustain them, but it was all they had. They ate in silence, the cold making every bite a challenge. Yet they knew they had to keep moving, to keep pushing forward despite the odds. They moved under the cover of darkness, sleeping in frozen foxholes when exhaustion overwhelmed them. The nights were the hardest, the cold even more biting, and the darkness adding to their sense of isolation. Sleep was fitful and brief, often interrupted by the need to stay alert for any signs of danger. The constant tension, the knowledge that a single misstep could spell their doom, gnawed at their nerves. Every sound, every movement in the forest could be a potential threat. They had to remain vigilant, their senses heightened by the ever-present danger. The pressure was immense, but they knew they had to stay focused on their mission. On the third day, as they cautiously approached a clearing, the unexpected happened. The clearing, which had seemed like a brief respite from the dense forest, suddenly became a place of peril. The soldiers moved with heightened caution, their eyes scanning the area for any signs of danger. A patrol of German soldiers, their breath pluming in the frosty air, emerged from the trees, their weapons at the ready. The sight of the enemy, so close and so sudden, sent a jolt of adrenaline through the American soldiers. The Germans, equally surprised, quickly took up defensive positions, their eyes locked on the intruders. There was a moment of stunned silence, then all hell broke loose. The stillness of the clearing was shattered by the sound of gunfire, the air filled with the deafening noise of battle. The soldiers, caught off guard, quickly scrambled for cover, their training kicking in as they returned fire. The clearing erupted in a cacophony of gunfire. Bullets whizzed through the air, striking trees and sending splinters flying. The snow, once pristine and white, was quickly stained with blood and churned into a muddy mess by the frantic movements of the soldiers. Johnson cried out, hit in the shoulder. The pain was immediate and intense, but he gritted his teeth and tried to stay focused. His comrades quickly moved to help him, their concern evident even in the midst of the chaos. Miller, his face a mask of fury, provided covering fire, his Thompson spitting lead at the enemy. The sound of the machine gun was a constant roar, a symbol of their desperate fight for survival. Miller's determination was clear, his every action driven by the need to protect his fellow soldiers. They were outnumbered, but they fought with the ferocity of cornered animals. Each soldier knew that their survival depended on their ability to hold their ground and repel the enemy. The battle was fierce and chaotic, a test of their courage and resolve in the face of overwhelming odds. Turner, his mind racing, knew they couldn't win this fight. The odds were stacked against them, and the enemy was relentless. Every second counted, and he had to think fast. The battlefield was a chaotic mess, with explosions and gunfire echoing all around. Turner could feel the weight of responsibility on his shoulders, knowing that the lives of his men depended on his next move. They were outgunned, and Johnson needed medical attention. The sight of his wounded comrade fueled Turner's determination. He couldn't let Johnson die here, not like this. The enemy had them surrounded, and their ammunition was running low. Turner knew that a direct confrontation would be suicide. He needed a plan, something bold and unexpected. A daring plan began to form in his mind, a strategy that could turn the tide. It was risky, but it was their only chance. Turner had always been a quick thinker, and now, more than ever, he needed to rely on his instincts. He glanced around, taking in the terrain and the positions of his men. Every detail mattered. A desperate gamble to save his men. He knew that if they could create a diversion, they might be able to slip away unnoticed. It was a long shot, but Turner was willing to take the risk. He couldn't afford to hesitate. Time was running out, and the enemy was closing in.
Wilson, take Johnson and get to those trees. Turner barked the order with authority, his voice cutting through the chaos. He needed Wilson to understand the urgency of the situation. The trees offered some cover, and it was their best chance to get Johnson to safety. Miller and I will hold them off. Turner knew that he and Miller had to buy as much time as possible. They had to create a distraction, something that would draw the enemy's attention away from Wilson and Johnson. It was a dangerous task, but Turner trusted Miller with his life. Date cord and a timer. Turner quickly explained the plan to Miller. They would set up explosives to create a diversion. It was a risky move, but it was their best shot at survival. Turner could see the determination in Miller's eyes. They were in this together, and they would do whatever it took to protect their comrades. Set it for 5 minutes, Turner instructed, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. The timer would give them just enough time to execute their plan and make their escape. Every second counted, and Turner knew they had to move quickly.
Wilson, despite his fear, understood. He nodded, his face set with determination. Turner could see the fear in Wilson's eyes, but he also saw the resolve. They had been through so much together, and Turner knew he could count on Wilson to do his part. He grabbed the satchel and, with Miller's help, dragged the wounded Johnson towards the relative safety of the tree line. The forest offered some cover, but it was still a dangerous journey. Every step was a struggle, but they couldn't afford to slow down. The enemy was relentless, and they had to keep moving. Turner, his eyes narrowed in concentration, emptied his rifle at the advancing Germans, buying precious time for his men. He knew that every bullet counted, and he aimed carefully, trying to make each shot count. The enemy was closing in, but Turner was determined to hold them off for as long as possible. As Wilson and Miller disappeared into the trees, Turner felt a glimmer of hope. They were almost there, almost safe. But the danger was far from over. Turner knew that the enemy would soon realize what was happening, and they would come after them with everything they had. Turner grabbed his radio, a mischievous glint in his eyes. He had one more trick up his sleeve, a final gambit that might just save them all. The enemy was monitoring their frequencies, and Turner planned to use that to his advantage. He knew the Germans were monitoring Allied frequencies. It was a risky move, but Turner was willing to take the chance. He needed to create a diversion, something that would draw the enemy's attention away from his men. He was about to give them a show. Turner took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. He knew that this was their last chance, and he was determined to make it count.
Command, this is Firebrand 1. Turner's voice was calm and steady, despite the chaos around him. He needed to sound convincing, to make the enemy believe that they were in a desperate situation. We're pinned down near the bridge. Request immediate air support. It was a blatant lie, but Turner hoped it would be enough to confuse the enemy. He needed to buy more time for his men to escape.
He grinned. Turner knew that this was a long shot, but he was willing to take the risk. He had to do whatever it took to protect his men. It was a blatant lie, a desperate bluff, but Turner was a master of deception. He had used similar tactics before, and he knew how to play the game. The enemy might be strong, but Turner had the advantage of cunning and strategy. But he hoped it would be enough. Turner glanced around, taking in the battlefield one last time. He knew that this was their only chance, and he was determined to make it count. The enemy might be closing in, but Turner was ready for whatever came next.
Trust me, the detonation of the satchel charge, a thunderous boom that echoed through the forest, was their cue to act. Turner and Miller, using the distraction, sprinted towards the tree line, their boots pounding the frozen ground with urgency. Behind them, the air was thick with the smell of cordite, and the shouts of confused German soldiers echoed. Wilson, true to his nature, couldn't simply follow orders without question. As he and Miller helped Johnson through the undergrowth, he noticed a group of German soldiers flanking their positions stealthily. They were close, too close for comfort, and the tension was palpable. Thinking fast, Wilson grabbed the remaining explosives from the satchel with determination. He whispered his plan to Miller, a plan so audacious, so utterly insane, that Miller could only stare at him in disbelief and shock.
Wilson hissed, his eyes gleaming with a dangerous light. He then proceeded to do something so unexpected, so utterly bewildering, that it bordered on the absurd. He crept towards the unsuspecting Germans, his every movement cloaked by the dense undergrowth. moving with the stealth of a shadow.